Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a while since I have covered Hans Niemann on this channel, but today I am very excited to do so. It's obviously been a crazy 4 years. If you've been following chess for all those 4 years, or maybe just half of them, or only recently, you might have watched the documentary on Netflix as it pertains to Magnus Carlsen, Chess.com, Hikaru, and Hans. Well, Hans has played in some events over the years. Most of those events feature Magnus Carlsen, and Hans hasn't won those events. But what I will be covering today is arguably his biggest breakthrough in his career thus far, as Hans Niemann, in dominant fashion, won a Grand Chess Tour Rapid and Blitz event. The Grand Chess Tour is an annual event. It's held and organized by the folks at the St. Louis Chess Club, and generally, you've had Magnus play in these things, Hikaru play in these things, Fabiano, Caruana, and all the legends of chess of the past 10, 15 years, and they play Rapid, Blitz, and Classical. So, Hans Niemann won one of these events featuring Fabiano Caruana, featuring Wesley So, Alireza Firouzja, Gukesh, the world champ, Sindarov, the potential next world champ, the challenger to the world championship, and I will cover their matchups in another video. So let me just take you through these games. I mean, this was an incredible display. Hans very busy nowadays on social media, busy with his own projects, but evidently putting in the work as well on his chess. We're going to kick things off with this game against the reigning champion of the world. Not in this format, but in Classical. Gukesh opened up with d4. Hans went for a typical Queen's Gambit declined with knight f6, e6, and d5. Then I will also show you a game against against Firouzja, a game against Duda, a game against Wesley So, another game against Fabiano Caruana, a game against MVL, and a game against Wojtaszek. So basically, it's the Hans Niemann versus the World Tour, where he tries to defeat every single player in the tournament. Gukesh went for this line, very standard stuff. Hans played c6, very solid, closed Catalan. Both guys are going to develop their pieces. White could potentially break here with e4, or he could break with nothing. H4 is the move chosen from Gukesh. Typical Catalan idea nowadays. You just move your h-pawn. I know it looks a little bit ridiculous. At some point, the clash has to happen, and here it goes. c5 and e4. So all the pawns in the middle of the board are smashing each other's face in. You can take in either direction. You could take here, you could take here. What you shouldn't do is you shouldn't take this way, as that will then grant white a lot of access in the center of the board. So Hans does this, and now we have e takes d5, and Hans throws in this pawn move. The idea is to give away the pawn to the queen, but put it in the diagonal of the light squared bishop on a6, which is why Gukesh goes here. Well, Hans re-centralizes his pieces, and Gukesh goes for the bishop on e7, which Hans defends with rook e8, very sharp position, and in 25-minute chess, you don't have a lot of time to think. Before you know it, you've burned over half your time, which is exactly what has happened to Hans here, who plays back to f8. Somehow he has a pawn here. This pawn on d5, though, is looking like it's going to be captured at any second, but it goes here. And now knight e7 is an idea. The bishops are always seeing each other. Hans chops this down, chops down the rook, and plays knight to d5. Maybe then his queen is going to activate as well on one of these files. The bishop has to move, and we have queen e8 looking for a trade of queens. You best believe that my man Gukesh is never taking the simple option ever, 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 ever. Queen e6, queen f3. He's never looking for a draw, 5 minutes to 1 minute. Hans Niemann, this is one of his early games. Remember, you're still kind of trying to settle into your form, but now f6, g6 kicks out these knights. And before you know it, we go from 5:30 to 1:22. Gukesh tanks all his time and has 18 seconds on the clock. That is, by all intents and purposes, that is not good time management. I mean, I'm just saying, right? Not that I would have done any better. I'm just saying, you have to manage your time a bit better. Gukesh gives away the pawn, and now Hans has to grind him down in this endgame. Hans, the only thing he has here is the split pawns by white. If this pawn is here and the king is here, you just agree to a draw. Black has a more active king and potentially will be first to get the knight into the game. And he's going to try to grind down Gukesh the same way that, you know, Magnus Carlsen would try to grind down this position with Black. Black has a better knight and Black has a better rook. And White has worse pawns. So you have microscopic advantages here. Gukesh is going to try to defend himself. Nearly impossible with no time on the clock. And Hans activates the pawn majority on the king side. Splits the defense, h3, h2, simply moves the rook, and that's game over. That was very instructive. You'll notice here that Hans picked up this pawn on g4 like this, and now because he has the 3-on-1, he very quickly breaks through with the pawns and makes sure to defend one of them, and that gives him massive winning chances, and he finds a way to promote. The rook guards the knight guards the pawn's going to be guarded by the rook. And he wins a very nice game. And when you win a game like this early in a tournament, it really propels you, you know? And what also propels you is bouncing back from bad positions. Here we have a Najdorf Sicilian against none other than Fabiano Caruana. You know, it's really difficult being a Fabiano Caruana fan, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in this video. Fabiano Caruana started this tournament in disastrous fashion. Not like disastrous in a bad way, just as a fan, you know, you want your favorite player or team to win. And when they give you these winning chances and then they take them away, well, it's really brutal. So here, you know, the game plan for White, it looks very simple. You just expand on the queen side and then you kind of break through over there, or you go to the middle and then you target it like this. I don't think this was the best way to play because it generally in Sicilians, if Black can get a pawn avalanche going like this, it's going to be really bad for White. We actually saw this type of game in the World Championship match in 2018 in London between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. Some of you weren't even alive then. Some of you act like you weren't even alive then. Yeah, I mean, in those positions, you know, Black gets e5, f5, attacking possibilities galore, and really, really nice position, and that's what's going to happen in this game. Hans played relatively quickly to land himself in this position, and even though Black is not checkmating, beautiful king positioning in the middle of the board, excellent understanding from Fabiano. White just doesn't have anything here, and it's going to get a lot worse. I mean, Hans playing really fast, trying to put Fabi under clock pressure, and there are the pawns. And I mean, Fabi is playing this game like a robot. The rook takes control of the open file, the h-pawn is looking strong, Hans goes for counterplay, but in the process weakens his queenside, and the advantage absolutely balloons. Rook d4 is a very fancy move, you can't take it because you're pinned, but it doesn't really matter because Black is going to infiltrate, and I think at this point was the biggest advantage of the entire game. So Fabi now has to play knight f6, and there's ideas to jump in with the knight in the future. Like after you play knight f6, it's kind of difficult for White to make a move. You're always threatening some sort of rook g1 ideas as well. If this knight ever moves, the rook goes to d4 and maybe d3, so the knight kind of has to stay there. But, I mean, you know, he goes rook g1 right away, and Hans finds knight a7. And knight a7 is absolutely brutal to get hit with. And the difference is, if knight f6 was played and then knight a7 looking for knight c6, Black has the option to play a4 check. And this is extremely important because you have rook a8 in all lines. And that one resource now will not only get Hans back in the game somehow, but his king walks out onto the queen side. Like his king, when you come up with defensive resources like this, it is a wind in your sails. At this point, you know, when White plays king a4, king b5 with Black, you're panicking. You are just panicking because you're like, wait a minute, I might even lose this position. And lo and behold, like I said, it's tough being a fan of Fabiano Caruana. Out of nowhere, Hans Niemann has broken through on this side of the board against all odds and straight up wins this game. He doesn't even save a losing position. He promotes the pawn and wins the game. Knight f4, he's going to get this. If e1, knight to d3, and the game ends with Hans up nearly 7.5 minutes up on the clock. I thought it was 7:22 to 55 seconds. It's 22 seconds to 7:55. I mean, Hans plays at such a ridiculous pace. You know, he was worse, but when you play rapid, the clock is part of the game. And that's the way it goes. And you can't really blame Fabi here. He was better, but it's not like he was completely winning at any point. And to find this idea to walk in with the king like this is just, it's absurd. Now, a guy who struggled in this tournament a lot is Alireza Firouzja. In this game, I'm not going to analyze too much. Why? Because it was total symmetry. It was a Queen's Gambit type of position. Hans played very intelligently in the beginning. It was quite clear early on, like Hans was in great shape. The boys traded all their pieces. Alireza Firouzja had a 2-on-1, which if it simplifies down, the pawn would end up pushing, and black would need to dedicate resources to stopping it. Honestly, it doesn't even matter. Like, this position is extremely equal, and it was a queen endgame, it was a rook endgame. This endgame actually reminds me of the candidates game. You remember the game Hikaru Wei-Yi? When the king was hunted out of the corner, Hikaru got both his rooks into the corner, which is not supposed to happen. And like Hans here is setting crazy checkmate traps, you know, and black plays king g6, and then plays rook here, and it's looking really dangerous, so white has to, you know, use his g-pawn to try to escape. And he does win his pawn here on h3, but the position is still a draw, but it's very tricky because white is sort of running out of space. And you cannot play rook takes f6 here because of rook f1 check. Right? Yes, but there's 4 hanging rooks. Oh, and then there's rook fh1. That's why. And this rook is stuck, and if the rook moves, there's check and then check. And then you, I mean, yeah, this really reminds me of that game. It was a double rook endgame. Anyway, Alireza goes here and just loses on the spot. He could have went rook c8. That was apparently the move that saved everything, because you're always threatening this. And if rook f1, I guess you go king g2 and you threaten the rook, or king e2 even, I think threatens the rook. Anyway, Alireza just loses because he thinks that this is a drawn endgame, but it's not. Black is winning here. You can't push these pawns. King g3, my pawns are way faster. And Hans beats Firouzja. So Hans beats Fabi, he beats Firouzja, he beats Gukesh in the rapid. And, you know, as a little bonus, a little bit for dessert, he beats the local hero in Warsaw. This one is Damiano defense. This is a line where you capture symmetrically. It looks like a beginner's mistake because after the knight moves, you win the queen on c6. But black has a way to play this position where he goes down a pawn. This is all engines. Computers have basically just have shown that you can play this line. So here's an example of 2 2700 level grandmasters. Hans' rapid rating is ridiculous. Top players just don't play enough rapid. There's just not enough rapid tournaments, so their rapid ratings are really stupid. Yeah, this is just 2 guys that memorized 18 moves of theory each. Yeah. So up to this point, everything has been memorized. Here, black has to play rook f8, and now black plays c6, and Hans plays h4, which is the best move, actually, and Duda plays king c7, which is not the best move. Here with black, you have to play f5, followed by rook e8. So this is chess. I mean, both guys memorize 18 moves of theory. White has a little bit of an advantage here because he has quicker development. His king is safer. He's also going to be first to attack the structure here by black. Very instructive. Duda allows this. And now the rook is able to immediately go target this pawn. So basically, because black gave up a pawn, he was trying to win the pawn back, and then white was trying to give away the pawn at an opportune moment to seize the initiative, because black drained so much time winning the pawn back. And now you see this is going to be a real problem here. This is a position with a lot of difficulties for black. Duda tries his best to defend himself. He actually has to end up just giving away a pawn. F2 is hanging by white, but after this, both these pawns are hanging. You cannot defend them both at the same time. So you go here, I take, I try to hunt your king out like this, but Hans is just up a pawn. And here with white, you are either going to defend yourself or you're going to crash and burn. Very instructive by Hans here. Very instructive. He trades off 1 rook. If you want to win a rook endgame, it's better to have 1 rook on the board than 2 rooks on the board. The 2 rooks can create a lot of counterplay. 1 rook, you stabilize the position. Practically speaking, it's still holdable for black, but it's extremely unpleasant. It's really difficult to defend an endgame like this. Can I just quickly draw your attention to something? Hans Niemann is up 17 minutes. Now, they start the game with 25. I don't know how he plays like this. I really don't have any idea. I mean, I think he's the fastest player in the world, except maybe Jan Niemann. And the 2 of them will be playing a match against each other, I think in Serbia. I think that's one of the things that Hans was setting up. Yeah, and, well, this is how he converts. He trades the knight for the bishop. It's actually very instructive. Repositioning the knight, and then like this, and then knight takes f5. And yeah, bishop versus knight is a dominant endgame. Why is it dominant? Because the rook and the bishop are extremely quick. They work really well together. They're long distance pieces. And the knight is just standing there. It's not moving. It finally moves, but it's too late. This is the losing endgame. This is very instructive. The king cannot cross. The rook is defending the pawn. And this pawn's going to go. You're going to walk with the king and the pawn together, and black cannot defend it. See? Look at this. Very instructive. I think actually here, this is a mistake from Hans, but instead he should have played... Well, here he could have just probably played king b3 and walk with the pawn. But if you play king b3, black has this idea rook f4, and suddenly this is going to be an issue. So it's not so easy. But this is wrong because black has to go rook a8, apparently. And, I mean, that looks rook a8, rook c4, king e6, and you get back to the pawn in time, I guess. Yeah, but this is not right. You have to go king d5. Yeah, I mean, very tough practically to understand. Duda doesn't understand it, and this is losing. When you're dominated like this... I mean, Hans won this game like it was child's play. I mean, the guy plays a dynamic opening with black. He gives away a pawn. Hans just maneuvers the pieces beautifully, understands the position, targets the pawns, wins a pawn, gets the knight versus bishop endgame, and makes one inaccuracy because he has a 16-minute lead on the clock and wins. Yeah, just total domination. Now, one thing I would like to show you is the Blitz was not smooth sailing. Hans dominated the Rampant, but the Blitz is 18 games. 18 games of Blitz. Anything can happen. Somebody can get hot. And historically, when Carlsen was playing in these tournaments, there have been days Carlsen sat down and won every game. He won 9-0 in the Blitz. No, sorry. Yes. 9-0 in the Blitz. Because I think this tournament is 10 players, so you play 9 games against everybody. I'm pretty sure. It's not 8 players with 7 rounds. I think it's 10 players with 9 rounds. Anyway. Wesley also was doing really well in this tournament. And in the first early rounds of the Blitz, you know, you got to restabilize from 25 minutes to 3. It's not so simple, you know, and Wesley is one of the best chess players in the world, particularly in a slow format. Hans gets very aggressive here, but it's actually Wesley who has 2 minutes up on the clock. Wesley could be a great poker player, all right, because I think Wesley is very ice cold in these time controls. Very, very good, very consistent. Wesley is also, he is going to be a prominent character and there's an upcoming documentary. It's going to be featured at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I think I'm in it as kind of a narrator, the glue guy to explain the story. It was the big story of the freestyle tournaments in 2025 and kind of how chess is changing. Yeah, I can't wait. I haven't seen it, but you know, Wesley's going to be prominently featured, so I can't wait to see what that's going to be like. Yeah, Hans, I mean, goes a little crazy here. G5, C5, D4, just all the pawns forward. Wesley's really good at just like dealing with BS, and he just, you know, he chops down the position, smart with his defenses, bishop f3. Hans gets an opportunity here. Here, there's just a winning line, bishop takes, and knight e3. I don't really know what Wesley missed here. No, I think I do know. I think he probably saw take, knight e3, bishop d3. But you win because the rook has to move, and then you have rook d1. Maybe Wesley saw rook d4, but this doesn't work because of bishop b5. But there was rook d1, and this is just a pin, skewer pin. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Wesley misses a chance, then he completely breaks through on this side of the board, you know, pushes the pieces down, and it's an opposite-colored bishop endgame, but the reason why this is totally winning for white is because he's up 2 pawns, and one of the pawns is a square away from queening, so now he's up 3 pawns, and 3 pawns are promoting. This was the worst game that Hans had in the whole tournament, probably. Just absolute domination from Wesley. So 4 passed pawns, actually, if we move the rook out of the way. And it looked like, all right, Wesley has been at the top of his game for like 10 years. He's in the top 3 of the Grand Chess Tour all the time. Hans is probably going to lose his lead in the Blitz because it's Hans. It's also hard being a Hans Niemann fan. Not just for reasons to playing in the tournaments. You know, it's like he also gets hot and then he doesn't cross the finish line, you know? Like, for this documentary that came out on Netflix, I feel like they were rooting for the moment. Like, we've been waiting for the moment that Hans is going to win an elite tournament where Magnus is playing, and he's not even in this one, which is like, you know, but that's what we've been waiting for, the Speed Chess Championship, something where, and the World Blitz, they played in the World Blitz, they played in the quarterfinals, and Hans had a lead, and he blew that lead, you know, so you're kind of like, is this it? Is he going to blow this lead? Well, you know what? In the Blitz, it was Hans and Fabi. That was the show. Once again, I'm gonna go. We got another Najdorf, just like the last one. And in the last one, Fabi got the kingside attack, and he had a great position, right? In this game, we went for actually a similar looking structure. Fabi, A5, Hans, King H1, and F4. So before Fabi can attack, Hans chooses a totally different plan. He does not allow Fabi to get anything going. He forces Fabi to play more on the queen side. And the position is a little bit more chill, very dynamic. Sicilian is such an incredibly complicated opening to understand. And Hans sacrifices the rook. It's a positional sacrifice. All right, he opens up the black king. Black also loses all pawn mobility. And nothing can move now. So it's going to be a maneuvering game by black. Also with white, you can take this pawn. It targets the rook, but mostly it's just an extra pawn. Hans takes it and moves the queen. And now has a position where he has a bishop and a pawn for the rook. But Fabi's taking over. Fabi doesn't need any pawn mobility. He has rook e1. And the advantage, once again, is going to plummet into the pit. And Fabi is dominating. And this is not a domination in the previous game. Rooks and knights, a little bit of a mercurial, is that a word, position? This one is Fabi needs to convert this position and probably checkmate Hans. But he chooses the wrong move. He goes here. And now there's no attack after you trade the bishops. And you actually can trade the queen. Because Hans will go here, activate the knight, activate the rook, and this rook is so passive and isn't able to enter the game easily at all. You're going to need 3 moves. So we have f6, and a4 is apparently a double question mark blunder, but it's blitz. I mean, here you were just supposed to play queen e4 and knight h4, but he goes a4. a4 is a total bluff. a4 is like, I want to go a5, a6, a7, and then, you know, you're kind of panicking because you can't stop the promotion square. With 20 seconds on the clock, Fabi's biggest weakness in chess is time trouble, by far. Like, of any weakness, I mean, he might disagree with me, but in time trouble, Fabi is not 2,800 level. I'm not even sure he's 2,700. And again, I don't like to say these things about top players, but if you want a chance to beat Fabiano Caruana, you gotta get below like 20 seconds on the clock. But the thing is, it happens to everybody. We've seen Magnus throw games in time trouble, Hikaru, all these players in their 30s and above. They're dinosaurs, man. You lose a little bit of control in the game. Fabi in this game for a while was surviving and doing well, and then he went here. He went back to d3. Hans got knight h4. The queen's hanging, but there's knight f5. You can still maybe hold your nerves with knight f2. But with 8 seconds on the clock, he goes here. That's wrong. And now not only is Hans Niemann back in the game, in just a few short moves, Hans Niemann wins. How does he win? Fabiano Caruana loses the game on time. In this position, he had 6 seconds on the clock. And he had a choice. King e8, king g7, king f8, king e7. Obviously, there's a fork. It's actually a position that's okay for white, because this knight is good, but the rook can't activate at all. Fabi lost on time, and Hans got a major win. Fabi lost several winning positions to Hans, and this will come back to bite when we talk about the end of the recap. Here's another victim of the Moki train getting moked in this tournament. It was a Spanish, you know, typical anti-Marshall variation where black cannot play the move d7, d5, d3. Hans's results in Blitz were topsy-turvy. He was winning games, losing games, but as long as you win a little bit more than you lose from the rapid portion, that's going to be good enough. This one was equal for a while. A lot of pieces got traded. I mean, it doesn't look like anything should happen here. Bishop e3, the queen goes back. We have an endgame. I think, honestly, MVL a little bit was reining it in. 4 pawns, rooks and bishops. Like, let's just call it a day. G3, you know, rook e1. And then all of a sudden the pawn got here. And all of a sudden, the pawn was stabilized, and all of a sudden, the king made it to the middle, and black is lost. Black is winning, like, out of nowhere. And oftentimes in blitz chess, it can happen really fast. Here with white, you needed to activate the king immediately. You needed not to move the rook. I mean, rook e3 is kind of a crazy move because the guy wants to go d4 anyway. So you could have went rook d1 here. He didn't because the king would come, but he went here, allowing this. And this was maybe the final moment. You needed to run the king out to f3. And if you go king f3 now, there's king here, so you need to play rook f3, king d5, oh, or king e5, sure, and king d3. This is what you have to do. He doesn't do that. And whether the position is dynamic and complicated or not, Hans Niemann in this tournament has been unbelievably sharp at his conversion. That pawn will go to d3 at some point, or you're just going to win the pawns. But trust me, the pawn is going to go to d3 at some point, or not. If you go here, it's going to go to d3, and you lose. You cannot go here because this is mate, so you have to go to the first rank, and then d3, and this is mate. Or you can walk to the rook. It doesn't matter. This is d3. It's not mate, but this is d2 and d1. Hans Niemann beats MVL in a totally symmetrical pawn structure. Everything good. Here's the problem. This is the last round of the Blitz Championship. This is the last round of the tournament. Fabiano Caruana has now won 5 games in a row. And this is what I was alluding to. It is impossible being a Fabiano Caruana fan. The amount of times that this man breaks your heart. He wins 5 games in a row in the Blitz. Generally speaking, if you win 5 games in a row, you're up there, especially if it's 2-3 games, everybody's winning and losing. So Hans Niemann, black pieces, last round, he wins the tournament. He draws, Fabi wins, we have a playoff. We have a tie for first. All right? He loses and Fabi wins, well, then Fabi wins the tournament. So Fabi's over there playing, he's playing his game. Hans Wojtaszek, the other Polish hero. We have an exchange, Queen's Gambit declined, Rogozin, this is what this is called, Queen a4 check, Knight blocks, Bishop pins, you go here, and it was quite clear Wojtaszek was like, last round of the tournament, let's keep it very chill. So we're gonna keep everything stable. Hans puts the bishop all the way back here, because otherwise it would have been in the way of the pieces, and the knight wants to go to e7, the pawn wants to go to c6. This is the way you play the Rogozin, and then the knight can reposition itself this way to d6 or to g6, and then the bishop goes to d6, and then black gets queenside counterplay. The Rogozin, honestly, is one of these lines, like, it's so fascinating because black can maneuver the pieces in a variety of ways. He does choose knight g6, bishop d6, but Wojtaszek has queenside pressure. That pawn is awful on c6. I mean, I don't know why he didn't go knight a4, just immediately targeting the pawn. Yeah, I'm not sure. But he goes rook b1, which is a move I don't understand because there's no threat to this move. Knight a4 looked much more natural to me. Hans, meanwhile, here bishop a3 would have apparently been a really good move because after rook c2, there's bishop f5. And you don't necessarily win these pieces. Wait a minute. Yes, you necessarily do win these pieces. What am I talking about? Because if bishop d3 is played, you have takes, and then you win this pawn. Okay, I have no idea, but apparently bishop a3 and bishop f5 was winning on the spot for Hans Niemann, and there would have been a material loss. He very quickly played rook b8. Actually, he spent 32 seconds on this move. I don't know what was missed. Takes, and white is like, okay, I'm never getting mated. Hans went here, and it's looking like maybe we're going to make a draw, but Hans is like, no, I want to play for a win, because if I win this game, I win the tournament. Bishop d7, takes, knight a4, and, well, we have another threat of a draw, and Hans is like, I need to advance on this side of the board. 2 minutes on the clock. Wojtaszek trying to defend himself. If anything, he has a better position. Knight back to d3. You can also play bishop d3 here. Hans may be looking for rook b2 infiltration spots. Rook b6. White also doing very well on the clock. h4. And, I mean, the rooks are going to get traded. I don't know how Hans Niemann is going to possibly win this game. Queen and 2 bishops. Queen, bishop, knight. What is his name? Magnus? What is he, a Norwegian guy? Bishop b2. And then the queen went here. And now there are serious questions, because the queen is going to go here as well. And with white here, you are not comfortable. You are not feeling good about your position. You're walking the king over because you don't really know what else to do. The other guy's just pushing random pawns. Queen b1. Do you have the nervous system to survive this position? Suddenly you give this square to the queen, and now it's difficult to defend your pawn. You go knight c5, and you've simply lost the pawn. There was no need to play like that. Instead, you could have went king g1, king f1 for the remainder of the game. But he goes here. Knight goes to c5, and Hans is just up a pawn. And it's going to get a whole lot worse because f4 drastically weakens the squares over here and this pawn. You could have maybe went f3. You could have went king g1. Wojtaszek is undoing the position. Queen b2. Hans, that is an excellent move. Excellent. Understanding that if the queen trade were to happen, you simply go a4. And even though white can stop this, he can't stop it forever. And I think even a3 is winning because you have bishop b1 or bishop b6. And if bishop here, there's bishop e6 and this. And even though you will go here, this endgame is still winning because queen d4, queen f4, etc. And ladies and gentlemen, Hans Niemann, despite 6 wins in the last 7 games, yes, I'm not just saying that to continue the meme that's old as hell at this point. Hans Niemann wins the last game of the tournament, and that is the most important game, and he wins the tournament. 22.5 points. 22 for Fabi. Fabi loses the tournament by half a point despite 6 out of his last 7 games being wins. And Wesley So had a great event. Wesley's always top 3 in these, man. Wesley So is easily a top 5 Rapid and Blitz player in the world. Number 1 being Magnus. Number 2, it's not even clear. It is really not even clear. I feel like if we organized a Rapid and Blitz event with Hans Niemann, he would, with like, 30 of the world's elite players, he would finish top 5. He had a very good World Rapid. He had a very bad World Blitz 2025. He had a very good World Blitz 2024. But that's what I mean. Like, Hans has not had a big breakthrough tournament. This is a massive tournament. This is a massive tournament for Hans Niemann to win against the elite of the elite. Now, of course, in this field, we're missing Magnus. We're missing Hikaru. TBD how Hikaru would do in a field like this. He had a rough Speed Chess Championship and a Candidates, but I mean, I want to see Hans Niemann play in a tournament with Firouzja, Gukesh, Sindarov, Nordirbeck, Keimer, Erigaisi. That is what we need. We need to organize an elite competition of the youngest, like 20 players in the world, Erdomush, and watch them all go to battle. Hey, maybe I'll organize it. How about that? Maybe I'll organize it. Next generation tournament. I might have just birthed an idea. All right, that's all I have for you today. As always, if you want to take your chess to the next level, you know where to find me. I've got my educational platform, Chessly. Signed copies of my next book are out in Canada, UK. They're sold out in the US, but you can pre-order it. Blah, blah, blah. European Tour 2026. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.